Welcome to Amazon Planet. I'm your host, Joel Amazon. Thank you for joining me in this never-ending quest to learn how to teach better. Today on episode 128 of the podcast, I'm joined by my good friend, colleague, and fellow co-host of the Teaching Math Teaching podcast, Dr. Jen Wolfe. Jen is an associate professor of mathematics at the University of Arizona, and we're here to talk about two chapters we authored for the newest volume in the AMTE, that's the Association of Mathematics Teacher Educators, Professional Book Series, Volume 6. Building Community to Center Equity and Justice in Mathematics Teacher Education, which is edited by Dr. Eva Thanheiser and Dr. Courtney Koestler. This is part one of a two-part series. In the next episode, we'll be joined by Eva and Courtney themselves to explore the vision behind the book. But today, Jen and I dig into the chapters we each led. So the chapter that Jen led was called Centering Community Care and Love in the Preparation of Prospective Secondary Teachers, a Collective Responsibility Approach to Mathematics Teaching and Learning. The chapter I led was Establishing the We with Prospective Elementary Teachers, Conversation Grids as Teaching Mathematics Methods as Agape. We also reflect on how our professional friendship and collaboration show up in this work. It's a conversation I'm excited to share with you. Let's get started, but just remember, if you like what you hear, consider picking up a copy of the book for yourself. The link to purchase the book can be found in the show notes at amazonplanet.com/episode 128. Without further delay, here is my conversation with Dr. Jen Wolfe. Hey, Jen. Welcome back.
Hey, Joel. Thanks for having me back. It's good to be in conversation with you.
Yeah, I was going to say, welcome back to Amazon Planet, the Say to the Return guest. You have your mug there. I appreciate the Amazon Planet podcast
I
mug.
do.
It's good.
Mm-hmm.
But
I get compliments all the time. People should check out the gear. They like the believe the good, believe there is good in the world.
Yeah. I don't think you're just a visitor to Amazon Planet. I would say maybe you have like a condo or maybe a timeshare on Amazon Planet, given your frequency of visits and things. And
yeah, no, I love to visit, love to stay. Yeah, I've got a timeshare in here. I like that.
And I'm in my podcasting closet, aka the COVID office, where we've recorded a lot of teaching math teaching podcasts as well over the years, and it just it's like there's a history in our working relationship here and our friendship, where we've found, it's like at conferences we found each other in different like sitting around. What was it? The first thing was like a complex instruction conference, I believe.
Yeah, it was a complex instruction, I think. Marcy Wood and Amy Noel Parks, right?
Yeah.
They had put together from the work they did that Smarter Together. And so we met up in Atlanta, and I think that might have been the first time we formally met. I think maybe tangentially we'd heard our names or knew about each other just, through Courtney Koestler and Matt Felton Kessler and some other folks that in different circles. Math Ed's a small community, so it was good that our paths crossed there.
Yeah, and you find each other at lunches and things at different conferences and whatnot, where like, hey, we have stuff to talk about. We like to talk about things. So here we go.
Oh yeah, because we had a long conversation. I think it was at PME&A 2016, 17. It was in South Carolina. No,
yes
18. It was the one in South Carolina, I think.
Well, it was in South Carolina. I was in such a jujitsu mode then. Like I literally got to South Carolina on the plane, went to the hotel, grabbed my gear, and went straight to the gym and to get in some jujitsu because I was just so pumped up about it. And I think I was probably sharing that about later at the
Well, I remember us being, I don't know if we were at the same table or nearby. I think we just listened to the opening panel and it didn't look like either of us were moving.
Yeah.
Like afterwards. Maybe that's, the soreness from the jujitsu.
Right?
Yeah,
that could have been
too.
Processing versus not wanting to move yet. Yeah, because I was getting taken out by some black belts.
And I think through those kind of shared conversations, we kind of found that you and I both take a collective responsibility type approach to things we do. We talked about community, talking about agape and love, and just found some commonality around there, I think, through our conversations.
Yeah. And eventually that led to, again, we've done a couple things together with regards to podcasting, but then we'd never worked together on a project. you know,
No.
and that's, and that, sometimes I don't know if it's envy or jealous, because like during the pandemic, you saw that. I mean, and know that people had different things that were happening, different working groups are trying to like, okay, how do we keep things going? How do we keep moving things forward? And seeing all these awesome works that people got creative and either did writing groups or whatnot to
Hmm.
get things out and about. And then, you know, I would be like, oh man, that's so cool. Like people are doing that, and it's like wanting to be a part of it, but then I'm like, not doing anything about it. Just being like, oh, that'd be cool, right? It'd be, versus like the whole like, hey, how do you take an active role in this? And
Yes.
eventually we were like, hey, let's figure out something to do. And I don't know what happened. Was it the call for this book that
I think it was the call. I mean, I think it kind of came at the right time and the right place for you and me to collaborate. I mean, I was thinking about this when we thought about having this chat, and I think philosophically, I would say that I've always been someone who puts like people and friendships and relationships first before necessarily collaboration on like at least in our scholarly work, right?
yeah, yeah,
But I like to get to know the people that I'm going to collaborate with and work. Some people are like, "Oh, we have a common interest in this. We should write something." And I'm like, "I guess that's there, but I like to get to know the people that I'm gonna collaborate with
yeah,
or do. Like it feels like the work will be richer, more authentic." And so, like, a lot of my collaborations that I've really enjoyed are ones where, like, we've established a good friendship relationship um, outside of the work that we do. Because I mean, if we were meeting around the 2015, 16, I think, and this is coming out 2025, and this is the first thing that we've written together. Do you know what I mean? I was just talking about
yeah,
Sheet about this. We met in the for Sheet Safi, a good friend of the
yep.
podcast too, right?
Current
Um,
president of AMTE. Yep,
that's right. We met through the STAR Fellowship Program at the time, which was an NSF early career funded thing that we were both a part of, right?
yep. Mm-hmm.
Rashid and I were in the first cohort, which was in 2010. We did not write and publish something together until 2022 in the Responding to Social Injustices, the middle school book that you
Yeah,
also
yeah.
have a chapter in.
Yes,
So
yes.
that's 12 years. So he's like family. We've supported each other a lot outside of the work that we do, but inside the work we do. But we didn't actually write anything together until 12 years later. And it was, again, that kind of like common interest convergence. And I think that's kind of the case here.
Yeah, it's kind of the good stuff that happens there, and and also like just for me personally, it kind of is a reflective of my own writing, where it's like, nothing comes quickly, whether it's a
Yeah.
chapters or chapters or articles in MTE, where working with editors over many years to finally get something out
Hmm.
or whatnot, and it's like those slow growth, slow burn. I don't know whichever you want to say there,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
but it creates good stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it's like when you think about the book that Ava and Courtney put a call out for, and it was building community to center equity and justice in mathematics teacher education. It's like, hey, this one, I know I can, there's something here that I could do, right?
Hmm.
And then also, hey, there's something that I could do here with my friend and colleague, Jen. And I was curious, like, were you on that podcast episode where we talked to, it was the Teaching Math Teaching podcast episode where we talked to Courtney and Ava about this book? Was that before or after you joined the co-hosting team?
I'm not sure. I think the call. Oh, you know why it's hard to remember is because I think I joined the podcast that fall and you had them on either bef like in the summer before
Uh,
that fall.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so I'm not sure if that because I think my first episode might have been later in the fall, so I
yeah,
don't know if I was on that
yeah.
particular one.
Well, I mean, that was it. I mean, it was when you heard, so you teaching math teaching podcast, part of the
Hmm.
AMTE organization. This book is one of the professional book series in AMTE. Having Courtney and Ava, friends and again friends
Hmm.
and colleagues as well, that are talking about this book that they want to put together, that they put the proposal together, and then basically like promoting it on the TMT podcast to get people to submit chapters and be like, yeah, I need to submit a chapter.
You submit a chapter. And I
Yeah.
think maybe after that conversation too, I think the way that this collaboration came about is that I think right at the start of the pandemic, I had shared resources and we did a full like 2 hour episode
It was two
on
and a
the
half hours,
podcast.
2.5, but that's
It
okay.
was 2.5 hours. That's
Counting.
right. So that was the first like condo rental in Amazon
Yeah, that's
Planet
right.
podcast, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so we did that episode, and from that one, I think we had talked about Sarah Vanderwerf's name tense.
Yep.
And
Hmm.
you had the idea of how do I extend that and think about it with conversation grids. And then you're like, well, I think you're like, okay, well, I should write a chapter around that. And now there's this call. And then you called me up and say, hey, Jen, what do you think about this? And then I was like, wait a minute, if you do that one, why don't I take lead on this other one that I've been thinking I want to write that is connected to some of the things we talked about in that 2.5 hour episode, but that
Yeah.
had grown over, in and through the pandemic, how my teaching kind of changed and different ideas around community and what did it mean to advocate and think about social justice and equity. And so I think that's how it came about.
Well, and then it's exactly what's in the title, like building community to center equity and justice in math teacher education. I mean, the
Hmm.
whole point of you coming on was like, holy cow, with the pandemics coming, how are we going to, do the stuff that we care about, not just like run a class, because
Yeah,
there's lots of people that just ran a class and they weren't very good, right? But
that's
how do we
true.
like
Yeah.
do it with integrity and doing taking care of the beliefs that we want to, with again centering equity and justice, and and that whole idea of like, do you feel a part of something, in through a screen, as
Yeah.
and how do we do that and do that well? And so that started there, and you brought a lot of fuel to that fire. And then my again, I've said this before, my teaching during the pandemic, my teaching since has not been the same since that
Oh no.
conversation. And then thinking about what then you're constantly evolving and refining your ideas. And I guess that's another thing, is like, is something that I wanted to talk about, is like that, having that iron sharpens iron
Mhm.
relationship, where you're throwing ideas out and someone is just doing a little bit of poking, doing a little like, like,
Yeah.
hey, have
Being
you
that
thought
critical
about this?
friend, right?
Critical friend. And that's what we
Yeah.
positioned ourselves when we both submitted our chapters, is like, yes, I took a lead on one, you took a lead on another, but like, they would not be what they are without the poking, the prodding, the questioning, the with love and care, not as just to be an a-hole.
Yeah, right,
But
right, right.
there's
Well, I
that.
remember, I think one aspect of that critical friend, and then like thinking about things to include, like I know with the chapter we wrote, and we had talked about this, I think during the podcast or in many of our teaching conversations, about how I always open up my class with an invitation to breathe.
Yeah.
And we would deliberately go through it. And then other times it would just, I'd have a GIF on the wall, I'd have a quote, just a reminder that we need to breathe. And I was like, I want to get this in there because like breathing in some ways is a political act and moving more towards equity and justice in the work that we do. I wanted to include that, right?
Right.
But I didn't know where to put it. And you were like, so Jen, you said you open up your class that way, right? Why don't we open the chapter that way? And I was like, this is brilliant. Like I wouldn't have thought to
Yeah.
open up a chapter that way. Because that's not what you see in academia, right? You don't
Right.
like we'll see sometimes like that quote at the beginning that's supposed to inspire, but I never really thought about, oh, if I start my class this way, why not start a chapter that way? But maybe
Yeah.
it is included in other chapters. I don't feel like I've ever seen an invitation to breathe in a academic chapter or paper.
Yeah. Well,
So I
let's do a
love
little.
that feedback, right?
Well, let's start there. Let's do a little overview of each of our chapters. So yours was
Okay.
no, sorry, centering community care and love in the preparation of prospective secondary teachers, a collective responsibility approach to mathematics teaching and learning. And yeah, just like you said, it's beautiful. There's like it's like a speech bubble where it's like, okay, here's Jen's voice coming across, and again, it's an invitation to breathe. And it's like it's centering, but it's also an example. It's like an activity. It's an intentional moment for the reader to do something, but it's also like an example at the same time. You're like modeling the way of what you want to do, which is very reflective of what we do within our methods classrooms because it's so
Yeah.
meta. Everything that we do where we're teaching a class is like, this is also communicating how I want them to teach their future students. And so the
Hmm.
meta awareness around, what you're doing within the book is also reflective of what you do in your methods classroom. I love that
Yeah.
aspect of it.
Yeah.
Um, and then you go into three different basically activities that you do within in your class, all towards this idea of this collective responsibility approach to math
Hmm.
teaching and learning. But like, think about that. Like well, I don't know. Well, like, think about the intentionality of what you put in there. But I don't know what I know you have something to share here, so like, I'll just stand aside for a sec.
No, I mean, I think we tried to figure out together what to include because there was so much to include, but what is it that we could kind of put together in a way that we felt like that addressed the purposes of the book, but actually would be taken up by other math teacher educators in the space, right? So I think the breathing part, like I always think about entering methods, like how do you know, humanize the space.
Right.
I know Rochelle Gutierrez talks a lot about rehumanizing, so I want to give credit
Mm-hmm.
where credit's due in the phrasing of that rehumanizing and humanizing. But thinking about ways I could connect with the students that made me look more human,
Yeah.
I guess, because I think, everyone's had that interaction with an educator or teacher where you're at a grocery store and your students are surprised that you're there as if though you don't
Yeah.
need a grocery shop. They're like, what are you doing here?
Yeah. You buy pickles? What? What's this?
What?
Yeah.
Well, that's like, oh, so I think breathing is one of those things because we forget that we do it all the time and that acknowledging that we do carry different experiences into the space and tension. And so like, how do we make space to like make that mind body connection so that we can kind of show up and engage in conversations as our authentic selves? Um, yeah, and it starts day one with that invitation of breathing. And then if I really want to co-create the space with students, I needed to think about what are some ways traditionally in the classroom that it's kind of been like a top down, right? It's been the teacher positioned as the one who has all the power, and the students are just there to absorb the information and learn things that you and I do not believe in at all.
Yeah.
So how does it start day one? And one of the things that we do is we co-construct community agreements, and that's not something new, right? That's
Yeah.
something that's been in the literature. Many teachers have talked about how do you
Yeah.
do this, and I think what we tried to do in our chapter is really think about like what would that mean at the undergraduate level? How do we do that in a math education method space? Um, and I think what distinguishes what we did is that we took work that was existing, like different ways we could use, like Peter Liljedahl's work in
Yeah.
the vertical non-permanent surfaces. We think about Desmos. I think Jennifer White has this activity about what do you need to feel shared and valued in the space. And
Yeah.
then we took it like the next step further and through these questions, engage the students in rounds of rough drafting, which is like the added piece to it
Yeah.
of I knew later on in the semester we would be taking up Amanda Jansen's work, another friend of the pod, right?
Yep.
In rough draft thinking. Well, if I'm going to do rough drafting in mathematics, how do I start in a low stakes way of hitting multiple goals? Like we're going to build our community agreements together. We're going to do it through a rough drafting perspective. So that sets the stage like, no, this is our space, not my classroom, our classroom. So what does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? What does it mean? Right. So
Mm-hmm.
coming to those shared understandings and doing it through a rough drafting process where I verbatim write down what they say and then I don't, erase anything. I color code, I mark things out. And so we can see the evolution of that rough drafting is also setting the stage for when we get into the mathematics, when, we're working with secondary folks, many secondary folks being good at mathematics, whatever that means to them in that moment, is part of their identity. And
Yeah.
so, how do we get them to think about how rough drafting and revising is a process that we go through in learning math? It's not that we, often we see a theorem, proof, QED, we're done. We
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
see all
Yeah.
the rough drafting and revising. So, if we can do that in a low stakes way, that's another kind of way that you get this is kind of a pedagogical approach we're going to take to learning mathematics while also cultivating and creating the space together.
Yeah. It's like when you start with the breathing, You're like,
Mhm.
there's like you have a point of like, okay, here's an indicator of where it might go. And then when you talk about establishing community agreements, it's like, oh, she's serious, right? This isn't
Mhm.
just like, oh, we breathe and now it's going to look like the math classes
Mm.
that, you know, if it's a secondary math person, maybe it's something that they love, like, hey, the QED, just give me the answer, regurgitate the algorithm, and you're done. Versus like, no, 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 we're building something a little different here maybe than what you're used to. And also too, it's the kind of math class that more students can be successful in, right? That it's not the maybe the intimidating nature, and thinking about the what do you need to survive, not only survive but thrive, right,
Right.
within this space.
Right.
And even to my it reminded me of my clinical instructor Joe Dye, who's been a guest on this podcast a couple times. He did that. Like he did that in where he was like wanted to make sure in the initial stages of the class to think about like what do you need in this class? Is it about temperature? Is it about
Hmm.
interactions? What is it that you like? You like to laugh a little bit, make sure that like that sort of thing. But then you're going further and just connect not only how we're going to make these community agreements so that we can do math better, but we're going to actually model the kinds of practices that we want you to
Hmm.
do in thinking about math. This idea of rough drafting and pursuing unfinished thinking and being comfortable with that and sharing that sort of like, hey, we don't have to have all the answers just yet. We're doing that here so that you can see it later when we're diving into the mathematics. It's like there's a lot. It's some cool moves that are happening
Yeah.
there.
And I think in these chapters, it gave us not only with community building, but also just thinking about with the call to the book about like, how is it reflective of your commitment or responses to equity, justice, and, care in the classroom, right?
Yeah.
And I think you and I had conversations about like, thinking about how, in what ways it was a deep dive, right? Like, how is what we're doing pushing back against like white supremacy cultural characteristics like power hoarding or
Mm-hmm.
individualism or a sense of urgency? And so, through an activity like that, we were able to talk more about, well, power hoarding specifically, like we're co constructing this together, right? We're pushing against individualism because this is a collective way of creating the agreements, but also thinking about what our responsibilities are, and then doing it on a timeline that makes sense to us. And so we're pushing against the sense of urgency because some folks are like, well, one of the pushbacks I've gotten is like, well, I can't afford to spend that many days building community agreements, going through this process. Even my students were like, that took a really long time. And it's like, yeah, because you're building the foundation,
Yeah.
right? And so what we're doing in like what feels like a couple of weeks, you might spend multiple weeks redoing some of these things or engaging in this work because you're really trying to set the tone. Like you go slower to go faster, but I wouldn't even say faster later. I would also say more in depth because taking this approach I have found has made the collaborations and the conversations that we have with pre-service teachers much more rich because they're willing to share their unfinished thinking. They're willing to take responsibility for one another's learning, to offer help, to really collaborate and feel vulnerable in sharing their ideas and know that they're not going to be fixed in one point in time and that everyone's growing. Like that is our responsibility to support one another in learning. And so I think in this being able to write this together, we were able to kind of do a deep dive on like we do these things, but why do we do these things? In particular, with regard to equity, social justice, care, love in the classroom. Um, yeah, so that's one of the things I really enjoyed about us trying to think about, well, what does that mean?
Yeah. I mean, one of the
Yeah.
things that we did this past year, try to set the stage, doing something similar is we did the rights of the learner that has like,
Hmm.
there's a one like where, and that's Olga Torres and then Krista Kalanick Craig has done a lot, written a lot about uh, that work. And there's an activity as a free activity. I'll post a link to it that
Yeah.
we did in all of our elementary math methods classes, and like where you kind of share the rights and then you kind of talk about what does that look like within a classroom, and then you pick one that kind of means the most to you. Everyone picked the right to be wrong. Like
Oh,
all these
okay.
elementary math elementary teachers that were stepping to a math methods classroom, they picked that I need to have the right to be wrong. It's okay.
Hmm.
It's because, they're a little bit of anxiety, some of them, in stepping into this space and knowing that it's a part of their program, but maybe it's not the part of the program they're looking forward to the most, you know? And
Right,
so like,
right.
so then, we put it out there like, hey, this is okay. So if this is something that you would like, now how do you make sure it's available for your students as well?
Yeah.
And I think I don't know, you did a really good job of explaining the activity and then how it like sets the stage again for what the environment is that you're going to be doing. And then like, and I don't know, again, we haven't, it's been a while since we revisited chapters. And then
Yeah.
think about the next activity that you go into is like, okay, now that you've set the stage, now what? And it's like you
Yeah.
give the now what. And I don't know if you want to talk about that next activity.
Yeah. I mean, the next thing is like thinking about how do we get how do we get to the point where we listen to each other? I think in the bigger landscape of what's going on politically and just in our world, I just wish more people would listen to one another,
Yeah.
not, and really try to think deeply about multiple perspectives. So one of the things that we do in our methods courses, I know you and Joel and I both do this, is that we really want pre-service teachers to listen to kids, to listen to them and to build on their ideas. Now, that's
Yeah.
easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
And I tell like my secondary folks, I say, I know you all are super excited about the math and that sometimes you think you're helping, but you're just telling them what to do.
Mm.
And so your challenge in developing your pedagogical awareness is to think about how do I listen to what exactly they say? How do I acknowledge that I've heard what they've said? And then how do I build from there? And so the next thing we shared in our chapter was to think about a learning to listen, listen to learn protocol. And it is awkward. Like, I'm just going to put it out there. It feels awkward at first for a post because they're like, Dr. Wolf, how are we supposed to do this? Because, like, it just feels really awkward. I'm like, well, what's awkward about it? And they're like, well, first you have to thank them for sharing. And I'm like, uh-huh. And what feels awkward about that? And they're like, I guess it's because I'm not used to thanking someone for sharing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, it is, right? We don't thank people enough for the gift of them sharing their ideas, right?
Yeah.
And often think about some of these big high schools, they may go their whole high school career with not ever being known by a teacher
Yeah.
or anyone in their school, or being asked like why they approach something some way. Like my students will come back when they try this and they're like, my students were really surprised that I thanked them and I asked them what they were thinking.
Mm.
And I said, yeah, that says a lot about kind of like what the classrooms sometimes look like in
Yeah.
spaces that we're not actually listening to students because students have brilliant ideas. And so we need to build on them. And this protocol, while awkward at first, students do come around to using the conversation stems, to thanking them. And then we talk about how the protocol itself is just a start. Like if it feels awkward, it probably does feel awkward because you're not used to doing it. But I also say put your spin and your vibe on it. Like if you just go up to a person and say, "Thank you, Joel, for sharing," and you sound like a robot, yeah, it's real awkward. You need to find the stems and the ways of talking that fit your vibe. I always say that, like it's got to fit your vibe because it needs to come off as authentic.
Yeah.
And then whatever that sounds like, as long as you are thanking and acknowledging them for sharing their ideas, the students, right? And you're repeating back the gist of what they say, right? Then they know that you've heard them, you've acknowledged it, and you're about to build on it. And
Yeah.
those are the points. If you hit those goals, however you do it with stems or not stems or picking up the language of, students today, like my niece all the time, she's like, it's not that serious, bruh. Like that's not going to come off as authentic to me
Yeah.
being this like Gen Xer, right? But you might be able to
Yeah.
say it to the students in some way that resonates with them. So using the language of the students and building on that. So those are kind of the things. I think it's a useful protocol, but also that I think revisions could be made to it so that it fits your vibe. As long as you're hitting the goals of like thanking the kids that you talk to, the students, you revoice what you heard. Because often the revoicing, they'll come back to me and say, when I revoiced what the student said, that's not what they meant. And if I had not done that, I wouldn't have known. I would have made assumptions about what they meant. And
Yeah.
that's kind of the point. Like you want to repeat it back so that like, no, miss, that's not what I said,
Yeah.
or no, mix, that's not what I meant, right? And so that brings clarity to how you can, what they meant, and then how you can build on it.
And you think about all the great pedagogical stuff that happens there, because then it's like I'm understanding, maybe I'm trying, and the vocabulary that you have to use versus, like, sometimes a student or we are not being as careful with our vocabulary as we'd want to
Mhm.
be. And then all of a sudden it's
Yeah.
like it's being regurgitated back to us like, oh, you don't mean that, you mean this. And so now
Hmm.
we can clarify that way. But then also too, though, I like I've been in a bear. I've been trying to catch up with the bear because the new season's
Hmm.
coming out. And
Oh,
so,
that's right.
like,
My niece and I have been doing the same thing. We're like, wait a minute, is it season four is about to
yeah,
come
season
out?
four.
Yeah.
And you think like maybe in this routine it'd be like, yes, chef, maybe, or her. Like I hear the main character saying like herd every now and then, like herd,
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
But then I'm thinking like back in the day, maybe word, word,
Yeah.
word, understand,
Word. Word.
Yeah.
I don't know if the kid, I think I hear a lot like, does that track?
Oh, there you go. There's that track.
Yeah. Does that track?
How old do we
That
sound
might
right
be
now?
outdated.
Yeah.
Do what? How
How
old?
old?
This conversation. That tracks. Oh, I think I used, oh, I'd co-sign that. And I got some looks and I was like, man, am I really out, like, am I out of it?
Ghost.
That's why I think it's so important that we're in schools all the time,
Yeah.
just to hear the language that kids use and just to know about the realities of what teachers and what their classrooms look like in and through a pandemic and then after. And I think things
Hmm.
have changed quite a bit. I think the chapters that we have are quite timely because I think these ideas are the ones that we should be centering in schools. Um, yeah.
So it's like setting the stage, through the
Hmm.
breathing and the community agreements. How do we
Hmm.
operate on the stage or within the stage, on the stage, whatever. And then thinking about, oh, what now, even like looking beyond. And so, like, talking about the last activity that you put.
Yeah. Yeah. So the last activity, what we thought about and highlighting in this chapter was how do we help our pre-service teachers build critical consciousness? And I think this developed in part for sure because one, it was like we were going in and through a pandemic. There
Hmm.
was the murder of George Floyd.
Right.
There was the massacre in Atlanta at the spa.
Hmm.
And so there were lots of things that were happening in our world that forced me to like pause and really think about. I had already been like kind of developing and thinking about my own identity journey because I identify as a biracial Thai American. And so, really doing deep dives on ways that I've served as both the oppressor and the oppressed.
Hmm.
And a lot of that work only for me came about in the last 10 years as the daughter of an immigrant and unpacking those things. And then um, with what happened and through the pandemic and what we were seeing, it was just like, how can things not change? Like, how am I developing my critical consciousness? And there were so many resources and webinars through and book studies and everything in and through the pandemic addressing like systemic oppression, social justice, and looking outside of math education, reading more books. I just was educating myself. And a lot of our listeners probably already do some of this work. And if you haven't, I encourage you to do it because you
Yeah.
don't want to extract the emotional labor out of your historically and presently excluded marginalized folks to do that for you. That's something that you need to do. And so I started doing that deep dive and then thinking, okay, if I'm doing this, it's really important that our pre-service teachers are also developing their critical consciousness. So how do we do that in mathematics education and in our methods courses? So I know you and I had a lot of conversations about like how do we intentionally sequence different activities we're going to build and what are those entry points into the work? Because
Hmm.
at the end of the day, I want students to pause and move with intentionality with their students in humanizing ways. So I don't, it has not been successful, I will say, speaking from my own personal experiences and not assuming, a universal narrative that if you come out straight out the gate in your space with talking about racism and you're in a predominantly white space, or um, that doesn't go over so well.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a good entry point. People kind of get immediately defensive. We start talking about privilege, and then it's all of a sudden, I worked hard for everything I had, and like you're backtracking, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a really difficult thing to do. So we've been trying to think about what are those entry points into the work to develop the critical consciousness in ways that will stick. Um, and so that's in this chapter, we start thinking about, okay, well, what are our beliefs? So building on the principles to action and thinking about beliefs to access and equity, beliefs to what does it mean to learn mathematics and do mathematics. And, so we start on like some different belief statements and we sort them into productive and unproductive. So not bad and good, but like productive and unproductive. And we have really good discussions around that can lead into tracking some of the work that the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, NCTM, and their Catalyzing Change books have talked about. Um, then we move into Robert Berry has a Todos webinar that he did around mathematical microaggressions. So we
Yeah.
get that work. We build on Karen Karp and Beth Kobett's work on strengths and assets, like taking different beliefs or different statements and trying to reframe them from asset-based perspective. So those are always illuminating because there's statements in there that many pre-service teachers, when they first read it, will be like, well, I don't understand why we need to reframe this because it's such a common phrase that we use in the schools. Like you might say, well, my high kids,
Right.
right? And then
Oh,
it's like, well, what do you mean by that? Like, what do you mean by my high kids, my low kids? And it's like, it's that understood, but it's also like coded words,
yeah. Yeah.
right? And so we talk about what does that mean? How do we reframe that?
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have good discussions around those statements where it's like, well, now we can talk about impact and intent.
Yeah.
Well, your intent might not have been harmful, but your impact was,
Yeah.
right? And so how do we first even recognize that? And then if harm is caused, which I tell my students at the end of the, we're humans interacting.
Right.
Let's just get over it. You're going to cause harm, period. So what we're trying to do is how are you minimizing that? And I think once
Mm-hmm.
we can get over well, I don't cause harm to my students. Yes, you do. You will. And then I share examples of the ways that I've caused harm and what I've done to try to repair it. So it's not only just developing the critical consciousness and awareness, but also when harm is caused, how do we repair that harm?
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, I think that's kind of the next steps that we took is thinking about the beliefs card sorting, watching the microaggressions, doing some drawing on Teddy Chow's work and others around like I am poems or digital storytelling
Yeah.
to try to really start shifting the beliefs. We talk about Yolanda Celia Ruiz's work around archaeology of self and like we can't, and I love she has a video where it's like we can't even begin to have our pre-service teachers take up theoretical practices when they have not done this work around like a deep dive of themselves and what they believe, because that turns into the actions that we take in our classrooms.
Well, that was I was going to point to that when you're talking about, like some of these common phrases that you have. But if you've done some of the work, like, the common assignment of a mathematical autobiography or something like that, where you're
Hmm.
talking about your journey with mathematics and you point to these kids, their own stories where there's ups and downs and all, like, so if someone would have defined who you were at this point in time, is that fair? Right. And like, does that,
Hmm.
and then even too, does that even capture who you are as a person and how you're like, are interacting within this space, this mathematical space? And so it's like, well, then why do it here? As
Yeah.
the powerful person within the space, and even too to point to, man, there's some of these mathematical autobiographies where there's some substitute teacher in third grade that said something to one of my teachers who
Hmm.
wrote about it when she's 20 years old. And it's like, how much power was given in that moment versus even thinking like if you're the third grade teacher, like how do you interact within a space? So again, thinking about the harm you can cause, but then also too the benefit, like, let's think about positive, like the benefit you can
Yeah.
cause, like the how much,
Yeah.
like how you can, you shine a light on their brilliance and like the way that they're thinking differently about a math problem. And all of a sudden, like they see themselves as doers, like,
Yeah.
but that could come from your own experience and not, wanting that what that third grade substitute teacher did versus like what you can do to like send them on a trajectory into the future of seeing themselves as doers of mathematics.
Yeah. Yeah. And even so, my students always ask, like, are these conversations that we should have in our classrooms with our students? And I'm like, I think yes, there is space for that, and also being aware of the political climate that we're in right now. Like
What are
I
you
would
talking about?
say,
Just kidding.
like we used to be, I don't know, we used to be able to just shut our doors and ask for forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's things could happen where you're blasted on social media, where they can find out where people can find out where you live. You could be jailed, you could be fined. I mean, and I think taking a note from the conversations we've had together, Joel, you've always said, Jen, we just need to be very creative and we need to know what our laws are.
Mm-hmm.
What are the laws? Are you educating yourself? Is that exactly what is said and written? And then just knowing that can help us think about how do we creatively subvert, like Rochelle Gutierrez would say, right? In doing the work that we know is right by kids and students, right? Like we have a moral obligation, but there are real consequences to the work that we do.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean we don't do that work. We just have to think about the ways that we navigate it.
Well, which is, I think, a nice, you know, well, uh, a demand actually of the
Hmm.
editors
Hmm.
was that we define what do we mean by community, equity, justice? Like, what do we mean by, because if you, and again, going back to the importance of vocabulary, if you have the vocabulary and you know what it is, but then, okay, maybe someone says you can't actually use the word. Well, I can
Yeah.
still, the thing is there. Like, I still know what I
Hmm.
care about and what I want. And okay, maybe we have to use a different word, like,
Hmm.
and like, and there's being educated about what it exactly is that we're trying to accomplish. Those goals don't change. It just maybe the vocabulary that we have to use right now might not be, um, might not be the same.
Yeah. And I think it takes us really going back as we're in the midst of it now. Like, what are your non-negotiables?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are your kind of moral imperatives that and your beliefs about educating folks? Like, going back to that and making that your anchor for what you do. Like in some ways, I've doubled and tripled down on the things that I do because that's what we do, because we know it's right, because they are human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And to feel valued in the space, to feel like our students belong in the space, we have to do that collectively and we have to have these conversations. So, yeah.
Well, you do a good job, and well, we do a good job with the whole. I mean, we talk about this a lot, like the caring, um,
Hmm.
about and for, right?
Yeah.
You care, I care about my kids a lot, but then like
Yeah.
you throughout the chapter is like it's not like just caring. It's caring about your students as teachers, but caring about their students that they will be teaching in the future,
Hmm.
and like giving them, the showing that you're caring for your pre-service teachers through these
Hmm.
activities, through the things that we're doing in there to help show like, hey, here's the stuff that you can do that actually puts teeth into what we were actually saying. And so
Yeah.
like giving that to them, it's so showing that you're caring for your students as
Hmm.
well, and starting from the breathing to all the way to helping them think about their own critical consciousness.
Yeah, and I think it all helps to bring your authenticity through, or at least I hope that's what it does. It's
Yeah.
that here are the things that you, my professor, are saying, but I don't see you walking the walk. And so I always go
Hmm.
back to that. How are the beliefs and the things I say aligning with the actions I'm taking in the classroom? And sometimes I have to pause and think about, wait a minute, is this actually aligning?
Yeah.
Right? What are those things that we do and we continue to do because it's the way we've always done them, and then really try to sit with that discomfort and be like, you need to change that. And you don't change it alone, you change it in community with with your students
Yeah.
because it's our space, right?
Right.
So in and through this, I still think I make a lot of mistakes, but because we do rough drafting, I feel like we can revise those things, we can make changes to those things. But I think it's really important that you take moments to pause and reflect and be intentional about like, are you walking the walk? I should say, are your practices in your classroom aligning with your beliefs? And I think that I continually go back to that because there are still places where I feel like here are the things I believe, but because of the academic context I'm in, I don't always feel like I've been able to make the jump to change certain things. So in some ways, I think the chapter is like incremental things that you can do, but I think they're powerful incremental things that you can do and take on that
Yeah.
will lead up to those changes. To be more specific, one example is that I have not moved to a ungrading approach or
Mm-hmm.
like an approach where there's lots of researchers out there who have done this, where it's like you do a portfolio based or like
Yeah.
students or they have conversations and then they grade themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't quite gotten to that point. I don't know why I haven't gotten to that point. And it's still something I'm wrestling with.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to take the leap this fall, but there's an example of like, wait a minute, we have this system where, we grade beef. Why are we grading our students, right? But
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
still in an academic space where at the end I have to assign these A, B, C, D, E grades. And I physically have to go in and assign, but why couldn't my students assign their own grade? And people will be like, oh, this is just, well, how in the world are you talking about this, Jen? I'm like, well, you can do it in very like clever and sustained ways. Like our good friend Mandy Jansen does it with like this kind of, she has big overall arching like goals and standards that they have to meet. And she's drawn on some work from our good friend Frances Harper, right, with an ungrading thing
Yeah.
and thinking about, okay, these are the artifacts that you, the student, can bring to support reaching those goals and big ideas of the course. So
Yeah.
why not be in conversation with them?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing is I'm almost there. I mean, I meet with each of my students one on one at the end of the semester, and it's their final exam. We have an actual conversation. So why don't I just move to this more portfolio artifact, big ideas? And I think I'm going to try to do it in the fall, but we'll see.
Yeah. You're almost there. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm almost there, right? But all that to say is that take the leap to do this work in building community that centers equity, justice, and care. And then I hope that the chapter we've written, Joel, will help others see, hear the things that are doable in your classroom, that you can take these steps and kind of move more towards that if you're not sure about what those entry points are or how to take the leap.
Well, that's what I was excited about is like
Yeah.
this, ever since I read Rico's book, Rico Gutstein's
Mhm.
Read and Write the World with Mathematics, or even like Gloria's book, The Dream Keepers, and she's talking
Mhm.
about culture relevant pedagogy and these like wonderful, and there's some great math teachers within the Dream Keepers as well. And it's like, how did they get there, right?
How did they
But
get there?
how did
Yeah.
they get there? And it's like, I think with what we put in these two chapters, and then also to the whole book, I think that there's lots of examples because
Mhm.
again, the editors Eva and Courtney did a really good job, I think, of
Really good.
helping people see like, hey, these are cases, these are things that you could do within classrooms, and even to the point where they asked to put in, hey, what are some struggles and potential revisions that you've already, even though that
Mhm.
you're presenting them, like here are some activities you could do, but hey, here's some things we're still struggling with around them, or some
Yeah.
revisions we're thinking about. I just love the fact that it's like, hey, here's a step. Here's a step you could take.
Mhm.
Thinking about your own reflections about what you want to do within the classroom. Hey, this activity might be the way to go. Maybe it's just to start breathing, at the beginning of the
Yeah.
class,
Yeah.
could just be there. And hey, here's a potential script you could use.
Well, I
Um,
think Ava and Courtney were very thoughtful in how they selected different section editors. So some folks might
mhm.
not know that with a book, sometimes you have section editors that look at, the different sections and try to think about a cohesive way to order the different chapters. And I just want to give a shout out to those section editors that I think they were very intentional and deliberate in how they sequenced the different chapters. So shout out to them and for Courtney and Ava being very intentional about those section editors because I think the books come together beautifully with that in mind.
Yeah, so just to show that's I've got the table of contents up here. Well, I'll put a link in the show notes too. Our section was cases to build community with prospective teachers. I think you could see that.
Mhm.
And our section editor was what? Yeah, Crystal Kalana
Yeah,
Craig,
Crystal. Mhm.
whoever you mentioned. And then there's also the cases to build community and professional development with practicing teachers. And then there's cases to build community with graduate students and fellow mathematics teacher educators. And so like each of those, and again, there's like what, 20, 24? Is that right? Holy cow. Oh no,
It's a lot of
there's a
chapters.
lot of
So,
chapters. Yeah, a lot of 28 chapters. So like I it's kind of it's kind of amazing all these different things. So I think it's a great book for anyone that's in this work of trying to teach math teachers. Um, I'm excited for people to have it. And so like that gets me to the shaping it to the chapter that I took the lead on
mhm.
in talking about these conversation grids. Again, the genesis of it was our conversation in talking about, hey, how are we going to do this thing with the pandemic coming up? How do we build community? And you brought what Vanderwerf's
Mhm.
idea of the um, name tents, and I know that I think Mandy Jansen had done those too, right? Didn't she do those in her
Yeah, and I think
classroom?
she also drew on them. I think Sarah Vanderwerf's the one who, credit where credit's due, came up with the name tents and has her wonderful website of resources. And I think a lot of folks have taken that up and then thinking about what are the different ways that you could take it up within a online space.
Yeah. And so like I just made it, you know, it was something where it's like, hey, it's your name tent where you got your name on the front and back and then you know, physically on a desk or something and then
Hmm.
hey, then that becomes you flip it over and it's, you know, it looks like a piece of paper that's split from top to bottom and so then on the top you put hey respond to this prompt and then at the bottom you put the math teacher educator would put a response to that prompt and so just playing off of that and then thinking about well what would be a sequence of questions that would build towards something and we did it where again it's a digital thing so we I used to call them like digital name tents but I'm like they have nothing to do with the name tent anymore because it's just a Google Doc, and so
Yeah.
we called it and it looks like a grid, so we called it a conversation grid between the instructor, you know, myself and the students, and having a place to just start building building those connections, right?
Hmm.
Building those conversations with the students, and even starting it with as easy as what's a question that you have for me, like what's one question
Yeah.
you have for me, and it's amazing the kind of things that would happen with when you just say, hey, you're in this space, you're in a math methods class. You know, what's a question you have? And then someone are like, well, why do you want to do this job? Like, why do you
Yeah.
like math? Or just like
Well,
all
what
these
I like
different.
about it too is just it's such a simple question, right? But there's a lot of intention behind the question
Yeah.
where you are intentionally asking that question of them because you're trying to plant the seed of curiosity,
Hmm.
right? Because throughout the course, we're going to be doing some mathematics together, and we want you to like, what was the Ted Lasso quote? Be curious, not judgmental,
Yeah, that's right.
quoting Walt
Yeah.
Whitman, right?
Hmm.
During that famous dart scene, which I always love.
Yeah.
But yeah, being curious. And so, like, how can we plant the seed of curiosity? Like, what would you all like to ask me? And so,
Yeah.
having to, like, why would you want to do this job sounds, sounds,
That's right.
sounds
So
like a great
your question
response.
is about what question that I is and it also
Yeah,
gets very meta from the beginning.
it
It's
gets
like, yeah,
meta because
yeah,
we're going to get meta this semester,
we are gonna
right? A
get
lot of
meta.
reflecting.
Right. Yeah. And there was like so it's a question about me and then it was a question towards and I guess I really struck like my thing was is about the definitions too and really thinking like, well, what kind of what kind of how do these definitions and thinking about and I guess I could go back and mention the
Mhm.
title of the chapter that we wrote was establishing the we with prospective elementary teachers conversation grids as teaching math methods as agape. And so my dissertation, as people heard on this podcast before, was on teaching math as agape. So now I'm thinking about, all right, how do I teach math teachers as agape? And so what does that look like?
Hmm.
And again, you've been a great thought partner in that process and thinking about, well, what do we mean by agape? What are we trying to do there? And even too, something as simple as this activity, but then the thought behind it in order to, again, develop community, develop this idea that there is care for them. Like, hey, just even that
Mhm.
first question of what is one question you have for Dr. Amidon is like saying like, hey, you might be anxious. You might have some things. Maybe you just want some sort of connection. Hey, do you like music? What kind of music do you like? What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite scented candle flavor? Like, like all sorts of different things versus, is this going to be hard? Right? Is this going to be scary? Like I've had those, and so just to be able to ease and like saying, hey, or like, do you have a dog? Like all these sorts of things that can bring some humanity to the space in just a really simple question and exchange that can happen over a shared Google Doc. I mean, it's kind of simple, but it's like there's a lot of thought behind it.
Yeah, because you're trying to build, I mean, when we talk about building community, we also talk about it being just kind of this relational space that exists like within the classroom or within, the Zoom room or
Hmm.
outside, right? And I think with the conversation grids being very intentional at thinking about like those prompts that help us build those relationships inside and outside. So I think you
Yeah.
have some other prompts that are tied to the community, which
Yeah.
again, I think is another kind of intentional seed that you're planting to be like, we will be engaging in mathematics and thinking about our communities,
Yeah.
right? In our work in schools, in and around, Oxford.
Yeah.
So just being intentional about finding those common grounds.
Well, and the second question is the one that we changed the most over, and
Oh,
it
okay.
was
Yeah.
it was a so the first one we said is a low stakes questions directed at the math teacher educator, so directed at me, the instructor. So then the second one is a low stakes question directed back at the pre-service teacher. I think we used to say, "Where's your favorite place to eat in Oxford?" Something like that.
Mhm.
And we working with not only you, but then also my collaborators, contributors from within the chapter, which was exciting that they were like my kind of like critical friends as well. Um, oh, I put them at the end. But
Oh,
Margaret
can you give
Slate,
a brief description of those critical friends?
yeah. So they were pre-service teachers at the time when we were, kind of in the midst of writing the chapter, but then also kind of refining the activity. And they were kind of like, my folks were thinking like, okay, so what are we learning from this question? What should be the next question? What are some things that, how can we use maybe some of the results? What are some ways we could share if there is some sharing with what we're doing, sharing some of the responses to build community within, not only within between myself and the students, but also between each other. And so, Paige Flateau, Margaret Slayton, Catherine Walker, and Kate Taylor Wilson are three of my former students that were big on. And I just we'd have little meetings before and after class to talk about the next phase of the question. And then we had kind of a big meeting after the semester in order to kind of talk about the overall structure, but just providing that critical feedback on, hey, here's the next question, what do you think, and like how does that build off of what we're trying to do, and having that's kind of a logical sequence where eventually we want to get to the point where they're thinking about their own relationship with the teaching of mathematics and what do they want to do with their own students, and starting with low stakes questions directed at MTE. So what is one question you have for Dr. Amadon? Then the second question, which we refined from, hey, where's your favorite place to eat in Oxford, which means, and just to be thoughtful about the question. So like, and you help me think about this too, is like the, oh, what does this say about, oh, we're going to eat out. All right. So what does that
Mhm.
mean about like financial resources and things? Or like even too, Oxford is not a cheap place to eat out. Or like, are you pressured to be like, is this a sit down restaurant? Is it a fast food restaurant? Like versus like,
Mhm.
you know, that says something about, you know, just maybe maybe the fast food me sort of culture that
Mhm.
we might be living into.
Mhm.
And I want to know what's their favorite place to go get chicken tenders. And like, that's not what I want. I want to, again, build a relationship with like, them. And so we adapted the question to be, where's your favorite place to eat a meal? And I got to say, Jen, the evolution of that question and what that's
Mhm.
led to, where people are talking about eating at grandma's house when she's making
Mm.
chicken parm or something, like all these different,
Yeah.
at a park with their, significant other, like, and their dog, or just like wanting, it's not even about the meal. It's more about what they're doing, like watching, like I remember, I think about my wife and I just celebrated our 22nd wedding anniversary, and
Oh,
one
yes,
of our favorite,
congrats.
thank you, one of our favorite memories was on Wednesdays. We would order, some cheap Chinese food and watch Dawson's Creek and Felicity together and on Wednesday nights. And then she would also talk to her grandmother about because her grandmother would watch Dawson's Creek too, and so she talked with her grandmother too. But it's like those Wednesday nights when we, just seniors, seniors in college and just starting a relationship. That was nice, and had nothing to do with the food, but it was more
Hmm.
the experience of doing it together. And going back to the bear, it's like, hey, that's kind of like some of the themes there. It's about, hey, what do you do? It's not really about the
We
food. It's
do.
about the celebration. It's about being together. It's about the environment, So I think that question got at that versus like, hey, this is my favorite place to go to for chicken tenders. So I just
Yeah.
really love the
Ooh.
evolution of that.
No, I love, yeah, no, I have to echo. I do love the evolution of that too, because we were really teasing through it. And I think you're also modeling for your think partners, like this, I don't know, like the nuances to teaching. Like I bet before they had never thought that math teacher educators like ourselves really wrestle with these ideas and that our
Hmm.
words matter and that we would spend so much time thinking about an intentional prop, but then also revising it as we learned and thought about, well, what is the goal of this question? What is this question asking? But what is this question not asking? Or like, what might it generate that we might not even know? And that evolution led to really getting to know the students, right? I don't know. I really like that because I think that it shows kind of a little bit behind, like unpacks and behind the curtain modeling, like what we do as math teacher educators to improve our practices.
Yeah, and it really does and because you can be again, you can go back and be meta again, right? Like and
Hmm.
after, and some of these we would share because this is fairly low stakes, and so given it was low stakes, we would say, hey, put a refined version of it in a kind of a shared whiteboard sort of space. I think it was Jamboard at the time, but I don't think Jamboard
Hmm.
exists anymore. Jamboard doesn't exist anymore, so do a new have to have a new service. But anyway, having them share it so like they can see like others and what they put and like, oh wow, someone else is like, likes thinking about it with their grandparents' house or like there's a family Sunday meeting or family Sunday meal that happens for them too. And like they all have this sort of like there's some sort of connections that they see across the class as well
Hmm.
that might not normally exist if you don't ask the question.
Well, and I think too, when those questions get asked and you see the responses, there's ways that we're working towards changing people's perspectives or biases that may have or assumptions they made about people
Mm-hmm.
that can also serve as being more comfortable in the space to share ideas around those different kind of critical conversations that we're going to have and challenging ideas and not necessarily people,
Yeah.
right? So that we can have those good conversations.
Well, and that goes back into what what are you trying to build? So you're setting the stage, just like we talked about before. You're setting the stage for something else to happen. Eventually, I want these individuals to talk to each other about their teaching and
Hmm.
actually giving them, hey, I saw this, like this, saw this, maybe could be improved, right? That, hey, you're questioning during this activity. Here's something that could, to open it up a little bit more. Like that's not easy, right? That's not easy
No.
to do. And so like, and that means that you have to have a relationship. And so I can't remember Matt, he wrote the book, Not Light, but Fire. Um, but he talks about like
Oh, Matthew K. I think he's in
Matthew. Yes,
Philly.
yep,
Yeah.
yep. And in that book, he talks about like just saying having these like low stakes type questions like this,
Hmm.
so that hey, if you can't talk about your day, you're not gonna be able to talk about these critical topics, right? And so
Hmm.
you got to open up spaces where there's exchanges, for these, just again low stakes exchanges that can lead towards high stakes interactions around
Hmm.
one's teaching. You got to build the like you're saying before, you got to build the foundation. This is a way of building that foundation.
Yeah, and I think too, just to connect to our conversation about caring about and caring for. I think in the
Mm,
construction of the different questions, keeping that in mind. Is this a question where I'm engaging in caring for, or am I engaging in caring about, or is it both? It's not to say that one is better than the other. It's just being aware that, like, not only should you be caring about, but and you should be caring for.
yeah.
So even thinking about the evolution of your questions and the kinds of low stakes, medium stakes questions that you ask, it's all done with intentionality. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And then we start getting into some medium stakes questions where they're answering about what day would you like to relive again? Would you make any changes? If you had $1 million to donate to charity, which one organization or cause would you donate? Right. And trying to interact within the space. And then the final question was, what is your relationship status with mathematics? Why did you choose the word you did?
I love
And
that.
yeah, I like
Because
that
I
one.
always like when people say it's complicated.
Yeah.
And then, hey, tell me more.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And then, again, they have all sorts of different responses. But I mean, those next two, those medium stakes sort of questions, I mean, again, already that they've had two interactions, one where they're asking me, the instructor a question, two where they're talking about this favorite place. They're having like I'm reacting somehow, some way within the conversation grid where, and maybe I'm asking them a question back. And because
Hmm.
it's in the Google Doc, you can, mark it. And so that you can see like, oh, they have a response that they need to do. And so that we have this it's a conversation happening where some questions are being asked and responded to. And so even in those three and four, which they can be as you don't have, I mean, you could be like, St. Jude, they're an awesome organization. Or you could say,
Hmm.
my graduation, it was awesome. All my family was there. It could be fairly low state, but it's amazing how much sharing happens within those spaces where it's like, all of a sudden we're talking about a grandmother that has Alzheimer's. And in my family, there's some Alzheimer's that has happened. And so I can share, hey, my own experiences with that. And now we're developing a little bit deeper relationship. And again, the opportunity to demonstrate care towards someone, and so that you can understand. And even too, like sometimes I can hear like, yeah, that's happening in my family right now. And if I'm late for class, it might be because I had to give some care. I had to take somebody to an appointment or something like, okay, all
Hmm.
right,
Hmm.
and so like trying to see like, wow, that this is more than just a college kid that's late because they're trying to get a coffee. Like, no, they're showing care towards a family member because of this cause that they care about, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What so like when you think about these activities and these,
Mhm.
in the thought that we have put into them, and then you think about, well, there's a whole book of them. It's kind of overwhelming to
Yeah, it
think.
is a little overwhelming. So I'm like, oh, I'm really excited with this coming out and that we're going to be able to read all these other chapters. But also, well, I guess and also just trying to stay in that moment of excitement and know that when I read these other chapters, it's only going to help me become a better educator because now we have all these think partners, right, in these
Yeah, yeah,
chapters. But I also think it's amazing that we had that many chapters in different ways that people are conceptualizing community.
yeah, yeah. And,
Hmm.
and I don't know when these are going to play, but I'm interviewing Courtney and Ava as well, and to talk about like what they learned and think in getting all these different definitions is going to be interesting to have that conversation as well. One thing I did want to get into is like,
Yeah.
we had a chance to review what we've done, and there's been a decent amount of time between writing these and now it's getting out into the world. Like,
Yeah.
was there some things that like when you looked at it, you're like, ooh, I would want one more edit, or we talk about drafts,
Oh,
one more edit, or even thinking about maybe even critique of it. I mean, we talk about like this could be a place where someone could jump into this work, but I guess even that word I just said, jump into this work. I wouldn't want them to
yeah.
jump in. I'd want them to
Right.
thoughtfully step into this work.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
think first and foremost, when you're going to start this work, you really have to just do the, I think the individual work of like knowing who you are, like what your beliefs are, going outside of math education and reading a lot of the work, especially in like English language arts, where they've been doing a lot of this work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just continuing to want to learn, right?
Yeah.
And grow and know that you're going to make mistakes. I think that's the first place to start before you dive into just like, well, we're just going to do all this. Like, um, or at least that I can only speak to my own journey that I think it's helped me solidify more why I'm doing what I'm doing
Yeah.
and being more reflective of what I'm doing. Um, I think in terms of things I might change, I wish we had more space because I think that was one of the things that was hard. Thinking, like, Jen, we only have this much space, so we have to really figure out which activities we're going to include.
Yeah. Do you remember your first draft? It was the fire
Yeah.
hose, man. Holy cow.
You're like, you're doing all of this stuff. And it's like, yeah, yeah. It's like, okay, well, how do we narrow it down to like, people's favorite things, like
Yeah. Yeah.
um, three big ideas. Um, I think going back, if there was more space, one thing I would like to do is that because some of these critical conversations can be difficult to navigate because maybe you do or do not have like a shared racial identity with the folks that you're educating,
Yep.
that your lived experiences are different from other folks' lived experiences, and you're still educating and growing too, that like having vignettes of actual things that have happened in the
Yeah.
classroom, like different things that I've actually encountered
Mm-hmm.
when I've brought up these critical conversations, and we engage in them and showing like, okay, when like actual examples of harm that was caused and how that was repaired and the language that you use around it. Um, I think having something like that added to the chapter would help,
Yeah.
I
I-
think.
Well, in the first AMTE Professional Series had like the examples of things that had happened and people were
Mhm.
reacting to them. That was another unique way of how cases were done. So yeah, that'd be nice. The other thing
Yeah,
I
like I
was,
don't think I included in here, but one of the things that I will say that I did is that with digital storytelling, the original work of Teddy,
oh
I
yeah.
think the prompt said something around using actual like photographs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when I used that same prompt, and then one of my students who was an advisee of mine, so I knew them, identified as a non-binary trans masculine student.
Mm-hmm.
And they came up to me and said, I'm not comfortable sharing photos before my transition. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
one, I thank them for educating me
Right.
and I apologized for any harm I caused. And I immediately changed the prompt to include like memes, GIFs, videos, anything. And it's their story and what they're comfortable sharing. And I share that with my students too. I said, see, that's a moment where I caused harm. I didn't make it about me. I didn't say, oh, I'm sorry, that's not what I intended to do. Like,
Right.
no, change the prompt, thank them for educating you, and do better.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, something like that, I think there's some version of that in a different chapter that I wrote, but that's just an example of like maybe something that would hit harder in the chapter if I had more vignettes of here's a scenario of the thing that happened. What could you do?
Yeah. And I wonder if that brings it, I mean, because I think somewhere in the last couple years we had this debate about whole selves
Yeah.
and that was
It
that
was for the AMTE conference,
it was
right?
at
So
the
it
AMT
was the
conference.
panel, and they were like, so our students can show up and bring their whole selves to the space. And I was like, is that something we can actually do?
Yeah.
Do we ever truly exist in spaces where we feel like we can bring our whole self to the space? I mean, it was one of those things going like, I think we can get towards it, but I don't know. Like we could say, oh, I always show up as my authentic self, but I don't know that we always do. Do we know one, who our authentic self is? And can we always bring our whole selves to the space? I don't think so. And then I wondered how close can we get in certain contexts? But
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. So I mean, like again, we are we are we're a draft. we're just
We're a draft.
we're
We're
a
always a
draft.
draft.
That's right. Um, I know, and again, thank you for your
Oh
time.
yeah, what would you change or
Oh,
add to or revise?
well, after I saw the efficiency that you used in your draft, like in I know we co-authored these chapters, but I mean like you were very efficient in talking about these activities that you do in your class, um and it just I guess it takes me a while to think about it, and I want to like almost the play off of there's things that I do off of each question that would kind of almost like sequence it with in what we're trying to do within the class as well.
Mm,
And I think that would be, just seeing like how, it's, yes, it's an activity. You can see how it builds on each other. But then like even to think like, hey, and you could do this and you could do this and you could do like just not even like to flesh them out, but just be like, or even to connect, that would be nice is it seeing like the whole thing and this could connect to, you know, community agreements, like you were just talking about. This could connect to,
mhm,
like there's even I know that someone's doing poetry
mhm.
within the book as well. Like hey, this might play off of that. Just I think that would be just like going back to that question of like how do you do this work and like knowing that it's hard and if someone's willing to do the like do the stuff that you talked about to like prepare themselves to do this work well and now how do you provide them with the best resources to moving forward because it can be
Mm,
overwhelming but the fact is that
mhm.
someone's willing to wade into it especially now in this day and age like how do we provide as much support as possible and so
Yeah,
I think you know there probably could be more. And
I
again,
think
we're
so.
just a
Yeah.
draft, and maybe
Well, and
that's
I
why
even
this
think too.
podcast episode too. So,
Well, and I think so too. Like, because part of it is like how to in our chapters, like how are we responding to like justice, right?
hmm
When I think about social justice issues, I think that's one place where I have a lot of growing to do because I'm always like, okay, what's the purpose of mathematics? And then how are we using mathematics to address social injustices? I think is the next direction, next step I need to take. Because one of the questions I always have is that justice for who? And how can I engage in thinking about developing tasks or moving in ways and using mathematics to respond to social injustices when I need to be in the community to understand what are the social injustices we're trying to address.
mm,
And if I don't do it in partnerships with schools, communities, caregivers, then am I really creating things that are going to lead to change? So that's kind of like, I don't know where that fits in this chapter, but that's kind of like the journey I'm on because
yeah,
I'm always like, oh. And then in the political kind of climate we're navigating right now, what are those kinds of tasks and things that we can be doing in classrooms? So, is
right,
this what we're advocating for in the chapters that we've read? Is this ways that we can work our way to that? But at the same time, I'm like, we need responses now.
yeah, yeah,
It's that tension of like pushing back against a sense of urgency, but also recognizing that in some situations there is a sense of urgency and we do need to act, right? Because our inaction is still an action.
right.
So, yeah,
One thing I've
yeah.
been thinking about too is, and I'm again grateful for this book, is like these things that you and I do within our classrooms, our methods classrooms. All right, so now it's out there in a scholarly work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are we? Uh, why aren't we presenting on this stuff? Maybe that's the next task.
Yes, and that's to us is to
you know
present on it.
like that because like versus like oh wait isn't that just like is that in my mind I was like is that a presentation like but if it's foundational if we're saying it
Mm-hmm.
is and building community is and what we want to do in the classroom we need to set this foundation why aren't we doing better about sharing it with others other than and obviously thank you
Yeah.
for the book I'm glad it's out there and promote it but
Mm-hmm.
then also
Mm-hmm.
too we've done the if we've done the hard thinking about this how are we else are we putting out there other than this podcast so that's maybe
No, no, I
a
think that's
conversation
a really good thing to think. And I think for me, my experience has been that I haven't, and we've talked about this at length, that I haven't always felt like the things that I do, um, the only way I know how to phrase it is like, isn't everyone doing this already? Like, because I'm taking ideas that are already existing, giving credit where credit's due, and then I put the spin or add to or revise based on the context. Because I think there's lots of great people who make tasks, who have ideas. So how do you honor the work of these knowledge generators, right? Like we all are, and then
right
adapt it for your context, right? And so I'm just,
maybe
it
that's
took
the angle you
it
know
took a long time for me to even to write this chapter because I think about one of your podcasts where I think you talked about like Cal Newport and the slow productivity,
Oh
which
yeah,
I
yeah.
just read.
Mm-hmm.
It's like do fewer things and work at a natural pace. This chapter that we wrote together, I think honors those things, especially the work at a natural pace, because this is stuff that in and through the botanic, like this is a culmination of like 5 years of work, right?
Yeah.
And then getting it out. And then, other ways. I've given some talks, like in the Star Institute and some invited talks where I've talked about what I've done. But even then, just getting to the point where it's like, oh, do I have something to offer? And it's not me being humble. It's me literally not knowing, like, everyone talks about doing these things and then finding out not everyone is doing these things. And so then it's like, oh, well, maybe I do have something to share. It's weird. I don't apply this sometimes the same ideas I say that are really important to our students and like, hey Jen, have you thought about like you do this stuff too and you should like honor that. I think yeah, I'm trying to get better about that
I think, and then
in
again,
sharing that way.
well, you've helped me in thinking about like the holistic approach of it, and like, and so acting with integrity as a teacher. If like if these are the
Mhm.
things you care about, well, can they see it within the things that you do, right? And
Yeah.
so that's what I
Like,
really
I
like.
think you and I are always happy to share, right? You
Oh
wouldn't
yeah,
even be on the podcast and doing other things and sharing that work to make our community better. It's that I need to get better about recognizing. I always say we need to recognize the strengths and brilliances we have in our students. And I do that. I do that. I recognize the strengths and brilliances in my students and I highlight those publicly and everything. I don't do that for my own work. And I'm sure some of it is cultural and how I was raised, like let the work speak for itself, but then I never speak about the work.
yeah.
So I'm trying to get better about that, right? And I think our conversations about like shoulder tapping and getting it out there, and
Mm-hmm.
I just have to remind myself. And having great friends and think partners like yourself, I've gotten more confident and better about doing that. I'm always willing to share. That's not the question.
Yeah,
It's that I need to get, I need to have more confidence that what I'm sharing will have an impact on people.
yeah. Well,
That's
so
it.
speaking of sharing, well, and
Yeah.
again, thankful for this. Again, thankful for this book that's going to be put out into the world, or that is out in the world, and that people should go get. We'll put links in the show notes. But one thing I did want to ask, because you're always thinking about this stuff, like just we we're talking about here.
Yeah.
What is the best thing lately that you learned to help you teach better?
Ooh, it's a great question. What have I done? I just mentioned that book, the slow productivity book,
Yeah.
but I think the three big things he says is doing fewer things, working natural pace, and then obsessing about quality over quantity.
Mm-hmm.
And I bring that up because it's like the things that I've enjoyed the most in learning from and with people is when it's around those things. Like I've done fewer things, so you get more in depth,
Yeah.
right? Instead of trying to do so many things at once. I think the natural pace really has helped me because I think all too often we are kind of like in this academic bubble of like the publish, Paris, produce, produce, produce.
Yeah.
And for me, the things that I've really enjoyed and then I'm learning about myself is that when I work at a more natural pace and I do it with others, the work that comes out of that is just so much more joyful. And I feel like I'm much more proud of it. And and so I think that's the thing that I've learned after reading that book recently, that those three tenets, I'm trying to stick to it. And I think it's helpful in other arenas too, that we can't do all the things all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's helped me slow down and be more intentional. Just even recently, I've been thinking about, okay, what are reasonable goals? I don't know. It helps. It's helping. What I've learned is it's helped provide me a little bit of a structure and specific examples where now I feel like, oh, here are some ways I can fill my cup, right? And be able to do the work that I love to do and honor the privilege that we have as what he calls knowledge workers
Yeah.
or knowledge generators. So that's the thing that I've learned the most is recently having what I've learned recently is having read that book and thinking reflectively about what I've done in the past and how I can move forward. So do fewer things, work at a natural pace, obsess over
Mm-hmm.
quality, not quantity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I keep coming back to that. And I think it's helping me be like, when we tell people that no is a full sentence, when our service activities and stuff, it's like
Yeah.
it is. And how is me doing this contributing to doing fewer things, to working at a natural pace, and to think about the quality of the things that we do?
Yeah. No, that's good.
Yeah. What about you,
Um,
Joel?
oh, I'm I that's a great question.
I know you're the one who came up with it. Great minds.
That's right. That's right. I'm really thinking about technology a lot. Speaking
Mm.
of Cal Newport, been reading about digital minimalism and like how do, and he talks about technology as a way to, this is big, this should be the Cal Newport podcast now. How do we use technology to build towards conversations, right? So like this is we'll even talk about the activity, the conversation grid should lead towards actual face-to-face conversations, not just acknowledgement within, a document. So he talks about like thumbs up or commenting on someone's social post does not mean you're in a relationship with someone. You have a connection, not a relationship. And so,
Mm.
this is a face-to-face conversation where I can see, your thoughtful look about what I'm saying, and like,
Mhm.
and then I'm smiling back, and so there's some joy, like, and there's interactions around the social cues, and it's actually feeding something within our brains that we need. And you thinking about, you know how in my classrooms are we using the digital tools in order to facilitate conversations and interactions. So like they have, these digital rubrics that they're using to fill out on each other's teachings, but then it's leading to a conversation that someone's having face to face with another person about, here's what I saw in your teaching, here's what I liked about it, here's what I think could be improved about it. And it's like, ooh, that's what the goal is to have that interaction, that face-to-face conversation. And so how am I using digital tools to facilitate that versus using them to replace it? And that's not what we want.
Mm.
Right.
I like that. Now you're
Right. So
giving me
my
a lot of things to think about.
sort of like my texting of my son, is not a replacement for the phone call with him or the FaceTime with him or the Zoom with,
That's right.
so yeah, that's I that
To fuel the relationship, right?
right.
Not to just
Yes. Replace.
continue a connection,
Right. Yep.
right? You're not
Yep.
replacing it. I like
Mm-hmm.
that. You've given me something to think more deeply about. I love that.
Um, so what is here's another one. What is one album you love to listen to lately? Because again, you're a frequent guest.
Um, I really like Kendrick Lamar's GNX album right
Mm,
now. So I've
yeah,
been having that one. Um, I frequently go back to A Tribe Called Quest, pretty much any of their albums.
nice.
But yeah, those are the two that are kind of like in Spotify for me right now.
I did
What
a
about you,
deep
Joel?
I did a deep dive. There's some podcast I think called Dissect that dissected Kendrick Lamar's entire Super Bowl halftime performance. It's
The number of
fascinating.
times I've watched that and people's reactions to it
Yeah,
is just, yeah,
it's
I love
genius.
it. It's
Genius.
genius.
Yeah. Um, right now I've been listening to some older stuff. So a lot of Rolling Stones lately.
Okay.
Rolling Stones Let It Bleed, which I think was a album of the episode not too long ago. But that's just, it's so good. And then so just because I know Rolling Stones were influenced a lot by the North Mississippi Hill Country blues, like
Oh, okay.
Howell Burnside, like they just love the blues, and so like there's just listening to it and then like playing some like I have some R.L. Burnside, I have some other like a little bit of BB King on vinyl that I've been listening to, and so just trying to dive into that a little bit, just trying to, if there's a chance to listen to some records, that's what I've been doing, but a lot of Stones lately for some reason. So
Nice.
there you go, a little classic. And then anything else? So we're gonna have a link to the book if people are interested in that.
Yep. Have that in the
Anything
show
else?
notes.
And we are currently, I am the associate vice president for STAR, Service Teaching and Research in
Mhm.
Mathematics Education. I'm the AVP for STAR, associate vice president of STAR Fundraising for AMTE, and you're the current AVP for the STAR program.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you just got done with STAR.
Just got done with Star, and as you mentioned, we have fundraising efforts, right, that
Yes.
you and a team have been leading. It's a great program for early career math teacher educators to get support in their teaching, research, and service responsibilities in their roles as scholars at their institutions. And so we just finished up our 2025 cohort summer part, right?
Yep.
We'll reconvene at the Association of Mathematics Teacher Educators Conference next February.
Yep.
And we do lots of fundraising efforts because this is the program itself is completely run on donations.
Yep.
And so some of our MTEs and former stars, if you're listening to this, and I hope that you are, if you can give just a little bit, every little bit counts.
Yep.
And know that you're contributing to the growth of your colleagues and peers. So big shout out to fundraising for
Yeah.
that organization.
Yeah. Fundraising last year led to a full cohort this year. So hopefully
That's
we can
right. We
repeat
ended
that
up
again.
having a full cohort participating, which is typically 24 if we can get enough donations. And so that leads to a lot of great networking conversations, friendships, and just an opportunity to learn from and with each other. And this cohort we had this past summer, fantastic group of human beings that I know will pay it forward.
Nice. Very nice. All right. Well, thank you, Jen. Appreciate you
Oh,
for
thank you, Joel. Always good to be in conversation with you. I appreciate it, dear friend. Yeah, so yeah, we'll just keep growing and learning together.
absolutely. There it is. There's my conversation with Jen. The purpose of AMTE on Planet is to learn how to teach better. In this podcast episode, I felt like it got as close as possible to capturing some of those conversations that Jenna and I have had over the years that have led to me teaching better. It's the whole point of this thing, is wanting to share those conversations with you. So for me, it's mission accomplished. I hope you got as much value out of it as I did over the years of having those conversations with Jen, and hopefully we captured a little bit of the magic there. So now it's time for the album of the episode, and my little way of connecting with you by sharing what I've been listening to. Though, let's be honest, it's probably just an excuse to talk about music. Since this is part one of a two-part series, I thought it'd be fun to pick two albums from the Beatles. So for today's episode, I'm going with Rubber Soul. So I was able to pick up Rubber Soul on vinyl, luckily, because I found it was one of those things. I'm just searching through like a milk crate, looking through, and I find like just a blank record sleeve, and in it, in the little circle in the middle, I see that purple label, and it says Beatles Rubber Soul, and I'm like, dang, I couldn't believe it. And I thought, well, maybe it's probably really, if there's no cover on it, it probably got all scratched up. So I looked at it, it's pretty good condition, and it was like, because it didn't have the cover, I mean, it was being sold for like $3 or something. So I'm like, $3 for Rubber Soul, I'm getting the record, and then so I put it on, and one of the first songs, if not the first song, is I've Just Seen a Face. Now, the first time I heard that song was on American Idol. They had like Beatles Week, where everyone had to sing a Beatles song, and a lot of them I didn't know, which was cool. Some of them were good, some were bad. But when I heard I've Just Seen a Face, I'm like, huh, this I've never heard it before, and it was catchy, it was poppy, it was one of those obviously Beatles-esque songs that just sticks with you as soon as you hear it once. And I'm like, I really love that song. And it was on this album that I just found by chance, and then was able to put on the record and on my record player, and just kind of get transported back to hearing that song for the first time, and then hearing it by the Beatles on the album in sequence with the other songs. It's just great. So not that anyone's going to be like, oh, Rubber Soul, never heard of it. I think it's on, when you go to like, hey, what are the best albums of all time? I'm pretty sure it's in the top 10. But it's definitely one of the top Beatles albums. But yeah, check it out. It just made me know that, hey, the Beatles have a deep bag. when I heard I've Just Seen a Face and when I listened to this album, there's just a lot there. And tweet this out. Beatles are good. All right, that's about it. That's going to wrap it up for this visit to Amazon Planet. Show notes are available at amazonplanet.com/episode 128. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can subscribe, rate, review, and share this episode to help others find this content. You can also subscribe to the email list to receive the Amazon Planet dispatch for teaching resources and updates from Amazon Planet. If you want to engage further, submit a question, comment, or suggestion to the mailbag by sending an email to joel@amazonplanet.com. Got some new stickers in, so if you send me a question, comment, or suggestion, send me your mailing address. I can send you a sticker back through the mail. Lastly, I'm always looking to collaborate with those leading others to love through teaching. If you have an event or opportunity, email me at joel@amazonplanet.com or visit amazonplanet.com/about to fill out the request a call form. Thank you for spending time on Amazon Planet. Special thanks to Jen for sharing their time and expertise in this part 1 of this 2-part episode, focusing on this AMTE Professional Book Series Volume 6. Pay attention to next episode where we have Eva and Courtney on, the editors of that book. Thanks to Matt Mifflin for the music in this episode. And finally, thank you to all of you out there learning to teach better and be the good in the world by investing in the lives of others. This world is a better place because you have decided to use the gifts you have been given to serve others. Thank you for all that you do. Peace.